Raiden Shogun's banner is coming up, and naturally that got me thinking about all the Electro characters in Genshin Impact. It's been quite a while since Raiden came out, and with all the new additions to the Electro roster, plus all the buffs to old units of the element, has Raiden long since been power crept as the best Electro unit in the game? Or was that never even the case to begin with? So today, I thought it'd be fun to take a look at every Electro unit we currently have, discuss how strong they are in the meta, and then decide whether they're in the running for best Electro unit or not. Then we'll decide who the best Electro is based on our final lineup at the end of the video. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Let's start off with the character who was recently free on the standard 5-star selector, Keqing. She has quite a few good qualities. She's an amazing quick-swap natured Electro DPS who works fantastically in aggravate teams. This is because of Fischl, another Electro unit, as this crazy young girl procs a ton of Electro shots every time an Electro-related reaction is triggered thanks to her A4. Keqing supplements this very well. Aggravate counts as an Electro-related reaction, and Keqing applies Electro in spades. Seriously, her application of it is lightning fast. These puns are gonna make somebody thunder with rage. Okay, this isn't the Cyno section. Anyways, she's pretty cheap to get going as she has plenty of competent 4-star teams, especially considering 4-piece instructors Kirara because she was recently free from the 4.8 summertime event. Alas, while Keqing is on the whole a pretty good unit, I can't in good conscience put her in the running for the game's top Electro unit because she's been power crept as the best in slot aggravate DPS option twice now, which is pretty brutal. Plus, her value is being carried hard by Fischl. The thing is, Keqing's damage has never been all that high. Don't get me wrong, aggravate did improve her DPS output, but with that being said, her main gimmick has always been the sheer amount of Electro she applies, not so much her DPS, which is why she was such a poor carry pre-Dendro. Ever since Keqing actually got a good unit to drive with a reaction that supplements her qualities well, she was able to be a pretty good Fischl driving unit. Yet remove Fischl and Keqing suddenly loses a whole lot of merit. A solid Electro, especially for new players, but certainly not in the running for the absolute best Electro in the game. Kuki Shinobu is a character with a very positive reputation among most people, and for good reason. She's the queen of Hyperbloom, is a super cheap 4-star option for the team, and because she's a healer she can work with Arena, which as we all know is a very positive quality. Her main claim to fame in my opinion is all Hytham teams. We all know how strong he is for so little investment, and the Hytham, Farina, Kuki, and the Hida team is nothing to scoff at scornfully. She can do some serious work damage contributions wise if you build her on all EM, as she's the primary Electro trigger for Hyperbloom cores. I'd say we can place Kuki Shinobu in the potential running. Her best in slot team is a very good one, working with Farina is always a win, and she's a character with lots of promise and merit. Beidou's an interesting one. I think nowadays she's a lot better in the AoE heavy Imaginarium theater as opposed to the more boss heavy Spiral Abyss, because Beidou's damage falls off a cliff and dissipates into a fart when she's asked to deal with single target scenarios. Another problem I have is that, while Beidou's damage is quite competent, you're not really going to be using her against boss content, which is the most common endgame content in the game. Her best in slot team, Electro Charged, has also been power crept by Hyperbloom, which is essentially Electro Charged completely juiced up. I said the thing, I said juiced. Plus, if you try to play Beidou as a second slot on Aggravate, yes, it will work, but her ER issues are super high, and you lose Fischl's A4 magic, so it's generally not worth it. Beidou's the case of not necessarily being a bad character, more so just outclassed. She's unfortunately not going to make it into the running. Yae is interesting. She's a powerful aggravate carry that is a decent upgrade over Keqing, because instead of just being a Fischl driver, you also play Yae for her own damage numbers as well. I'd say what Yae has in Clunk, she makes up for in damage. She's also not only an aggravate carry, but is also best in slot on Tighnari's spread. She can be played as an off-field spread sub-DPS and spread all Hytham teams too, and can also be a generally neat sub-DPS for any team in general. My main issue with Yae is that she isn't really that flexible as an off-fielder because of how much field time she takes up in order to complete her turret setup. It also doesn't help that Yae doesn't do as much damage if you don't have any Dendro present in the team to enhance her performance. So in my opinion, it's almost always better to play teams which focus on Yae as a main carry because of her field demands. Otherwise, I'd say another major negative point against Yae is that Clorinde dominates the aggravate niche. Though Clorox has a ton of teams, whereas Yae specializes in Quicken, so you can still use them both if you have them both, if you were to split the Fox into primarily being a Tighnari or aggro unit, and then Clorox into being more of a hypercarry or overloader. I do think Yae is a fairly decent unit, but she can't enter the running due to Clorox's existence. Kujou Sara is not to be underestimated, assuming you have constellations. She's kind of a clunkfest about C2, and her buffing only becomes super significant at C6. I'd say that when you do fill out her cons, she becomes well worth building if you're an Electro DPS fanatic. The main issue with this is that specific 4-star constellations on niche supports are incredibly hard to guarantee, because you simply can't. It took me, let's just say, an insane amount of polls to get my C6 Farazan. The fact that I mourn those polls in my video so often should speak for itself, but if you get lucky and have her cons all filled out, then let's talk about why I think she has quite solid value at that stage. For instance, she's amazing for characters like Raiden and Clorinde. The Shogun's hyper teams and overload teams can really benefit from Sara's huge buffing. She was obviously designed for Raiden in particular because the Electro Archon is a character who deals all her DPS in a very front-loaded manner, and Sara's buff caters to a short DPS window. This makes her really good for Clorinde as well, who infamously has a bit of a low uptime, and has a super hard-hitting burst. Her damage is still more sustained than the likes of Raiden, but because of how quickly Clorinde does her shots, Sara can buff them up quite nicely. This is especially nice for Clorinde hyper teams. On the whole, Sara actually has some incredible prospects, but I find that her constellations limit her accessibility quite a bit. She does always appear on Raiden's banner, which helps out a lot, but I still don't think I can say that Sara would ever beat the top Electro units in this game as one of the best. While some Electro characters obviously aren't going to be the best, I want to give every one of them a fair shot. I know that Lisa might not be that promising, but I'll still cover her positive and negative qualities for all those big Lisa fans out there. She's pretty nice in Dendro teams as a budget option and can also work as a TDDS holder. But keep in mind that her ER requirements would be pretty freaking huge then, and her burst is very valuable because it provides res shred. Ah yes, Lisa's burst. It makes her a lovely budget pick in Eula teams, but being good in Eula teams isn't all that crazy. Of course, it's still something worth noting. Anyways, her main issues outside of ER are that there's pretty much always a better off-field Electro to run that can provide more than her, and what she provides isn't overly unique aside from perhaps her burst. Also, while Lisa's constellations are quite good, you need to actively go out of your way to get them because starter characters never appear on limited banners. So, most people are gonna have her at C0 or perhaps C1 to 2 if you got lucky in the standard banner a few times. But let's be real, very few are gonna own C6. Unless you're the biggest Lisa fan on the planet, and if that's the case, shout yourselves out down below in the comments. Not going in the running, but I think we all knew that. Cyno's obviously not that crazy. The issue isn't his damage, he has a solid best-in-slot team that's comprised of many good units. His issue is how clunky he is. Cyno's multi-wave is awful, and while both Beidou and Farina tend well to his abysmally long field time, Nahida infamously does not do so when it comes to multi-wave situations. And that's another thing, his field time is so freaking long and I feel like he would have been a much better unit if they made his burst stay active even if you were to swap off and then back in again, kind of like how Noelle or Arlecchino's infusions work. It makes playing his teams a bit of a menace. His teams are also super expensive, and you need way too much investment in order for him to perform well. I've only ever felt like he is competent in boss scenarios where multi-wave isn't an issue, and all of his teammates have long uptimes. Yet if you aren't using his exact best-in-slot team, Archons, have mercy, you're cooked, my friend! Because a majority of other viable Cyno support simply will not last his entire field duration, and you'll lose both ways whether you swap off of him to restore their buffs and abilities, or whether you stick with Cyno to finish the rest of his burst unbuffed. Definitely not going in the running, too many clunk issues. Okay, a lot of my comments are telling me that Sethos' damage is good. I swear that I'm going insane because whenever I play him, he feels like he does negative numbers. Maybe the Sethos I play just sucks or something. I think his split kit isn't great because it would have been better to focus his entire kit on only his normal attack playstyle, which is a lot more intuitive, and buff it up instead. His charge attack playstyle is weird. You can't move during his charge attack at all, so say hello to constant knockback, and it feels so weird as to why they added this playstyle of his. Just play normal attack Sethos, I beg of you. Teams-wise, he's an aggravator, but he can also play a dual carry team with Tighnari where you swap between them during the other's downtime. It's definitely not Greg Heffley's best-in-slot team, and I wouldn't call it anything insane, but it's still pretty funny if you're in for a silly time. In any case, Sethos is nowhere near being in the running, but hey, at least he's a silly pants. Razor's main usage nowadays is Thundering Fury, and while that does work quite well for him, most of our Dendro teams are going to be significantly more worth playing. His physical teams are also... need I say more? I said the word physical in the context of Genshin Impact, I think that should speak for itself. He was my first ever main, so I do like the unit quite a bit because of that, but I can't say much about his meta value. He's more of an off-meta unit that you'd played for fun, but he's definitely not in the running for the best Electro character in the game by any means. Dori's got some interesting aspects to her. She can drive as a Farina healer while restoring the team's energy, and this particular playstyle becomes quite nice at C6. She's like a mini Raiden Shogun. You guys have also told me that she can drive Aggravate and Hyperbloom teams for a surprising amount of competence, which is really nice to see. Essentially, Dori is a decent amount going for her, and since she's a 4-star, she'll be decently accessible if you ever happen to run into her on a banner, while having pretty good constellations to upgrade to. Alas, she's nothing groundbreaking. Most of her units can replace her, and she's definitely not the kind of character that you go out of your way to play if you have other options. Plus, the fact that she's a nerfed Raiden means that she'll never be as good as Raiden, which automatically means she can't be in the running for best Electro character. With that being said, Dori definitely has her merits, more so than you might expect. Then we get to Clorinde. She is a beast, let me tell you. She's crazy. An incredibly strong Electro DPS of so many qualities. She essentially solves whatever problems both Yae and Keqing had in Aggravate. For example, she has self-sustain, but is still quick fire unlike Yae, and her high DPS also means she isn't just a Fischl driver and can actually play very competently in hypercarry teams, which are more centered around her. She has numerous great teams. Aggro, Hyper, Overload. I don't like Clorinde Quick Bloom, but since it exists, I'll mention it here too. I'd say her main flaw is that her uptime is a little short, but I honestly don't think it's that big of a deal because at least this lends to her being quite good with Kujou Sara. While she's not as much of a Fontaine meta behemoth as those such as Arlecchino, Nervalette, and Linny, she's still extremely commendable. I'm definitely gonna have her in the running. Then for the Electro Archon who inspired this video in the first place, I think she has quite a number of qualities and is more so good for newer players or those with smaller character rosters. Her skill provides a team-wide damage percent buff to burst damage based on talent level, which is something super cool that she does that I often see get overlooked. She's a true Duracell battery because no matter where and how you use her, she will provide the team with extra energy in some way, shape, or form, and if you've built her correctly, then her own burst comes back pretty much ASAP. This means you can have Raiden's teammates focus more on building offensive stats opposed to more ER stats, because Raiden will help cover for their needs. She can work across so many different types of teams, whether that be functioning as the main DPS, as a driver, or as an off-field Electro support. Raiden's also able to be built on either pure EM or crit. It seems like EM isn't very popular, funnily enough, the more you know. Her main flaw is that, with the more characters you get on your account, the less and less you will feel the need to use her. This is because others are usually better than Raiden in her exact same team slots, and you will find that she's very easily replaceable down the line. For example, using Kokomi or Hu Tao instead of Raiden to drive Furina Yolan double Hydro. She's the almighty Narukami Agosho with plenty of neat qualities, so I'm gonna put her in the running for the potential best Electro unit. Next, we have absolutely got to discuss Fischl. After all, I've talked about her so much in this video, yet we haven't actually went over what makes her tick. She's an amazing off-field Electro character that can flex into almost any team in the game, while having a best installed specialty in Aggravate for reasons that I've already mentioned surrounding her A4. She's quite a good generator of energy particles and is capable of doing pretty strong damage numbers herself with higher constellations. She's one of the great 4-star characters of this game, and while I don't consider her to be on the levels of Xingqiu, Bennett, or Xiangling, she most certainly has her place in the meta. Lots of people can utilize her, and she always feels very intuitive to use. Her main flaw is that sometimes a non-aggravate hypercarry would rather have a buffer in place of Fischl because it's better to focus more on the carry's numbers as opposed to splitting the damage between both the carry and a sub-DPS. Though Fischl's ER and Electro application do count to supportive qualities, however. I think that Fischl is a great flex for whatever you need one, and usually has some good things that she can provide to a comp. Definitely in the running for the potential best Electro character. Alright, so our all-star lineup is Kuki Shinobu, Clorinde, the Raiden Shogun, and Fischl. With all of these characters' points having been discussed, after careful consideration of each character's kit and their positive qualities within the current Genshin Impact meta, the best Electro character in Genshin Impact goes to Clorox Bleach. My reasoning for this is simple. She has the strongest teams out of the whole lot. Her DPS is higher than C0 Raiden's, her best teams are stronger than Kuki's best teams, and while Fischl is amazing too, I find that Clorinde isn't reliant on her if you have other support such as Kujou Sara. She is the best Electro DPS in the game right now, which in my opinion makes her the strongest Electro in the game. Of course, all the nominated units are strong. They're all great characters worth considering in their own right, and even the characters that I didn't provide a spot in the top league still have their own pros worth considering. I simply thought that this would be a fun time. Either way, you're more than welcome to disagree with me, and if that is so, then let me know down below why that is. Hopefully this video was able to tell you about the best Electro characters in Genshin Impact. This has been Juice, signing out. And fun fact, according to your theater voice line, Clorinde doesn't like newspapers. Kind of random, but interesting nonetheless.